Architecture is really the art and science of turning fiction into fact.
Sometimes kind of real architectural life interferes with intellectual architectural life.
There is no such thing as architecture.
Hello, this is Vikram Prakash, and you are listening to Architecture Talk. Each episode, we have a conversation with a contemporary thinker on issues of architecture and architectural thinking. We are trying to advance the frontier of architecture by imagining what it could be in new ways. Today, I am talking to Maristella Casciato, who is the Senior Curator for Architecture at the Getty Research Institute in Los Angeles. We're going to talk about the research that she has done on the work and life of Pierre Jeanneret, in particular during his time in Chandigarh. Welcome to Architecture Talk, Maristella.
Very nice to meet you, Vikram. I'm happy to be here.
So I think we should start off by simply thinking about, what attracted you to the life of Pierre Jeanneret and his work? Or not so much to his work. Of course, the work is very important and we know him. But what attracted you to him as a person?
Well, I think that this is the most relevant question for me to understand why I finally engaged in my work on Chandigarh and all what is related to the founding and then the development of the Punjab capital. I guess that at the very beginning, I was doing some research at the Fondation Le Corbusier, and I was attracted by photographs, a series of pictures where I saw the two cousins together in a very, very relaxed environment. Basically, they were used to spend some summer holidays or weeks, I don't really know exactly, on the north of France in a location called Arcachon, where, it's on a beach side. And it was really a place where they could, in a way, be completely themselves. There was nothing about the role of the Atelier Rue de Sèvres or something like this. And those are very, very funny, in a way, photographs. You see the two of them on a boat. You see the two of them making wrestling. You see the two of them boxing. So I said, my initial curiosity, if I can use this word, it was really about the man and how these two men related to each other.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, those early days, before World War II, when they were cousins practicing together. And what is the story behind Charlotte Perriand and their supposed rivalry around her?
It's a very good question. Also because, as you call, in the early days, the atelier was not overcrowded. There were people working there, of course. I'm talking about the late 20s, beginning of the 30s. And there were, the Japanese architects were around, Sakakura and Maekawa. And then Charlotte Perriand arrives. I never met her, I have to tell you. I read a lot about her, and I have met several people who knew her quite well. I can tell you definitely, and I think this is not this is not something I'm making up. She was an extremely intriguing woman. Very smart, quick to connect ideas, eager to learn. Coming from her more education in art décoratif, she was really ready to be more experimental. And I guess that the issue of the furniture, the very first project they did together, it's very much experimenting.
You mean talking about the chaise?
Yes, I'm talking about the chaise longue, all the chairs and so on. Because, of course, I mean, you can go through a wood chair, of course. There were already experiments in carved steel chairs. But, I mean, the idea of looking at that, both on the tradition, for instance, of the traditional armchair, the comfort, as they call them, the grand comfort, and then also introducing new material, a very light looking, for her was really an important components of her approach to both Le Corbusier and Pierre Jeanneret.
Were she and Pierre involved romantically?
I guess so. I mean, not that I guess. This is true. I mean,
right.
They were, in a way, they were attracted to each other, of course. It's a matter of fact that she was an extremely attractive woman. We may say she was a beauty. I mean, she was not only smart, but also beautiful. Both of them, both the two cousins were very much attracted by her.
Yes, there was a rivalry, sort of.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much we can talk about. I mean, I don't want to be politically correct. I mean, 100%. No. I mean, it's human being. But, they also had other reason to share, field to share. They were both attracted, by the countryside. They were extremely good skiers. They loved nature. They were attracted, for instance, both extremely attracted by photography. Now, Corbu has been also a good photographer, but he used the camera in a very different way. I mean, more to look at his building or maybe as a way of thinking. I mean, both of them were extremely, extremely skilled as photographer. And when Charlotte entered the office, she already had a camera that she received as a gift from her first husband, who knew of her passion for photography. And this idea of the camera going around, this is the whole period where they are interested in how nature becomes part of the environment, without romanticizing, but all this idea of the art brut, the stone, the trees, this becomes also part of a kind of natural artistic environment. Those are years that I think are extremely formative for both of them, but they also they are sharing mutually, what they like, and maybe in this sharing there is also a love, shared.
Because of his complex love-hate relationship with Le Corbusier, the Chandigarh project was perfect for Pierre, wasn't it? That he could be at a distance from Le Corbusier, still his representative and executor of projects, and yet at the same time at a place from where he could formulate and develop his own work and identity. And I think about this a lot, because to a certain extent, that same relationship was played out in the relationship that many of the Indian architects had with PJ as well.
Yeah.
There was a sort of a mentorship relationship, but also the desire to separate and distance themselves. I know certainly that was the case with my father, where there was a lot of respect and love, yet at the same time a desire to have some space for themselves.
I agree with your analysis, and I really very much engage with this idea that, in a way, Chandigarh, going beyond the myth that we know about, that so many other colleagues have been writing about and so on, the distance make Pierre to become aware who is he in life.
Right.
I'm positive that he was extremely unhappy. And I have read some letters and documents when he finally found out that Charlotte, for very, very important reason, she had decided to marry someone because she was really in danger. So we don't want to get into that. And I guess that finally he understands, he has to accept the situation, but in a way, going to Chandigarh was also a place to find another nature for himself. Something that would help in a way also to heal, if you want to go into this, but it's not necessary, but probably to find himself in the situation where he could really be the one who would complete, be the work of his cousin and some of the people, but he would also be able to express himself. He definitely needed that at the end of the 40s.
If that is true, then who did PJ become in Chandigarh?
Pierre was extremely skilled in let's say, in fields that are very much related to architecture, but have to do with invention, with being creative, with looking at a technique or a material from the creative point of view. All this was his contribution always in the atelier in Paris. When he finds himself in Chandigarh, Vikram, don't you think that the fact that, of course, he is the one who needs to make sure that the capital will be built under certain technological challenging and so on. But he also finds himself have so much freedom in saying, okay, let me invent, for instance, with a very simple technique like a brick.
Right.
Let me invent or let me build, for instance, housing. He comes from the period where housing at the office in Paris was basically the white villas. I don't want to know that he didn't like or he liked it. He was very much in charge of that. But what is very important, here he has the possibility to express himself, to work with something that it's very creative. Here he has the brick. He can work on different texture. He can work with the people. He makes himself so relevant to so many young Indian architects, but also the people who live in Chandigarh. I think he was a very popular figure in Chandigarh. People knew him. He was not someone who was the architect on a kind of aura somewhere. He was really working with what was his natural inclination. And I think that this freedom made him becoming a different man, a man believing in himself. He was really, without too much of a rhetoric, he was really, and I believe in this, a man of very simple things.
When I think about his life, in some ways, I relate very closely to PJ because, of course, he went back to Geneva at the end, but at the same time, he asked for his ashes to be carefully dispersed in Sukhna Lake in Chandigarh, which is a sort of a very significant gesture.
Yeah, absolutely.
He felt very close, obviously, to Chandigarh and its ethos. And the idea of putting ashes into water is a very Indian Hindu thing. I don't think it's a, Swiss Calvinist thing.
Oh, no.
I don't know how you feel about this. I live in the United States and I have a kind of a dual loyalty to India and to the US, and in certain way, I suppose to other places as well. But I think he probably had that similar duality to him, unlike somebody like Le Corbusier, who is, correctly described as a global architect who used his Paris centrality to look over the world. Whereas Pierre belonged, I think, significantly to at least a couple of places.
I agree, totally agree with you. I mean, though Le Corbusier developed, and that's also interesting, an extremely strong relationship, not very much to India, but to the idea of this city. There was more than just being the architect of the Punjab capital. On the other side, I think that Pierre needed a place like Chandigarh. As we say, he could really find himself as a human being in the place where, I mean, he felt not only loyal to the work that he was doing, but to the people, but also to the idea of the post-colonial India, to the idea of a capital of the specific region, the partition. So he felt that very, very strong, and he was able to communicate that because, I mean, your father was in the architect's office. We talked many times to the few, I mean, that have been still around, from Jit Malhotra to Sharma, and all of them recognized that they could always talk to Pierre.
Yes.
Pierre was always, the house, I mean, had always an open door. This is maybe very, very Indian, but, you know, for a European who comes, I mean, from a certain also, quote unquote, elitarian, bourgeois environment, from Switzerland, this is something that it's, either you endorse this and you fully trust and you fully understand, or you are not capable to change yourself. So this is really relevant. And you know how much he loved the Sukna Lake. I mean, you know, at a certain moment, he built this very funny pedalo because he loved the water, and he, in a way, quote unquote, he was missing the lake. I mean, the Geneva Lake. Yeah. So here he has a lake, and he builds in the garden of his house this very funny object that, of course, couldn't go that far, but it was fun to go. I mean, and use it. I mean, on the lake to have fun and going around. And I'm sure that many people saw it, many people use it. You remember, I mean, even the famous engineering, I don't recall the name.
P.L. Verma.
Yes. Even he was going with him. I mean, it's like a ritual because he loved, I mean, the lake, the water, but I also think he was missing something of that.
Right. No, you know, like what you were saying earlier, I remember reading in my father's articles that as far as he was concerned, that if PJ hadn't been in Chandigarh, Corbusier would have had a fight and left long ago, and that most of the projects would not have got done. He describes Pierre as a kind of a glue.
Yeah.
And more than a glue, sort of, he describes him as a kind of very quiet and unassuming facilitator who resolved conflict again and again, not only between Corbusier and the engineers and the administrators, but also between the Indian architects and the engineers and the administrators. He was kind of the passe-partout, or sort of the mediator on all sides. And I think this sort of having this open door policy, open door ethic rather, open door culture, which is again a very sort of Chandigarh Indianish thing, was key to that.
I fully agree with that. And we sometimes we know, I mean, that nothing was really idyllic in Chandigarh, even in the architect's office. We have read now about conflicts, about, I mean, people being competitive. People are, I mean, we know in the field of architecture, they have their own agenda. And, you know, I think that it was, as you say, the glue, but it was a kind of of natural for him behavior, because, it was so fun when I found in the archive, he tried with the architects to learn, for instance, some Hindi words, how to say few things, and
he
so
did.
on. Because, one thing Pierre was not skilled with languages. I'm fully admire of someone whose personality is so much outgoing, is so much based on generosity, that even if you don't completely speak the language, you are capable to transmit the message. You are capable to forward your ideas. And probably the other one, they were both, fascinated, but on the other side, they truly understood that he was totally sincere, that there was any time something who could have been masked or a second agenda. But of course, I have read few letters in the archive. There are some architects who are giving him very hard time. Not at the very beginning, not the first years, it's more the urge to build, to begin, that becomes a glue. But when things started to be settled, this is around 57, 8, and so on, people start complaining. He wants to be the head of that. It's always conflictual in architecture, because you deal with the ideas, but you also deal with the fact that you build. You can see something becomes real.
Right.
And at a certain moment also, don't forget, Vikram, that Max Fry, who played at the beginning a major role, is gone. They are both gone in 54. So he is there. He has to deal with the conflict, with the administration, teaching the architect, building the city, and does it with an incredible generosity. Probably that's his major asset there.
That'll be a good time to take a quick break. We are talking to Maristella Casciato about the life and work of Pierre Jeanneret. And we are back. We are talking to Maristella Casciato, and we are discussing what Pierre Jeanneret did once he was in Chandigarh. So let's talk a little bit more about his local relationships.
Yes.
And we all know that he, along with Le Corbusier, had a great fondness for A.R. Prabhavalkar.
Yes.
Who was a fine architect. And I must admit that I must have met him as a small kid, but whereas I have very clear and distinct memories of most of the other Indian architects on the team, I don't have any real memory of him. And I was, in fact, asking my mother yesterday about him, getting ready for our conversation today, and I collected some things from her. But anyway, from your reading and research, do you know why Prabhavalkar was so loved and kind of favorited by PJ?
I have to say it very frankly that there is, as you know, very limited literature. What really strikes me that Prabhavalkar was very much involved specifically in the Capitol complex.
Right.
So basically, Le Corbusier, and that's the project Le Corbusier really cares, for, because he understands very well that what will be built there, no matter what we think it now, will remain something exceptional. When they met in Chandigarh, he totally know that Pierre will be capable to handle the project in terms of construction, but he needed someone who can handle very properly Indian, the workers, the building company, and so on. So Pierre would not be able to do that because for various reasons he had many other projects, but also he was not Indian. So, it's not easy to pour all that cement or to work in such a certain condition, very different from Europe, no matter how good you are. So I think that Prabhakar was probably extremely good in technically very equipped, very skilled, and also capable to transfer ideas that were sometimes difficult to explain to the workers, but to transfer those ideas to the people who were on the building site. So by the end, he was, let's say, the condition sine qua non. Nothing else could have been done without him. And in a way, in a certain reflexive way, because Le Corbusier trusts him so much, he becomes like a toto with Pierre, him, and Corbu in the building of the Capitol complex. That's all I can. It's amazing that how many letters Corbu sends to Pierre, but always also, if it's about the Capitol, Prabhakar, it's always there. Even when he wants to publish, for instance, images in the Œuvre Complète, he doesn't refer to Pierre because he thinks Pierre is too busy, Pierre is not answering, and so on. So he sends him letters and say, please do that and that, please go to Pierre and ask for that and that. So he's the one that becomes his ambassador for completing the project.
Right. I think, that's right. I think that's exactly right. Prabhakar became Corbusier's man, a local man, really, on the site. I think that's true.
And in a way that worked well also for Pierre in a way, because, as I say, Pierre needed people skilled as he was, but he was also needed someone who could transfer to a different group of people. No matter how good you know what is a reinforced concrete, but to do the spray of gunite, all that, he needed someone who could really understand and be then there on the building site and say, we do this and this and this. Sometimes we lose the memory of how complex that building site was at the time.
That's true. Okay, so as we move towards the end here, let's talk a little bit about PJ's famous furniture and its contemporary, let's say, reevaluation in the art market. Of course, this furniture which was built very locally with the Indian craftsmen, and built in mass quantities for use all over the city, is now sold for, 50,000, 100,000 more per piece in the art market. What is your thinking about this unexpected trajectory of the furniture?
I don't know who started all that. We know for sure that few people understood very well that could have been a market and started when no one really paid attention. And then people in some of the one family house, they started, not to like them any longer because they thought, well, what's this? I prefer something else, maybe more decorative and so on. And so they probably sold them, but for nothing. And then they invaded the market. In a way that it was not unknown in the US, because this is specifically more US phenomenon. It was not unknown. Around 47, 48, Pierre spent almost a year in the US, and he worked for Knoll.
Mm-hmm, right.
And he designed several furniture for Knoll, and specific, those that are called the scissor chairs, that are then, in my opinion, really the base for some of his Chandigarh furniture, is referring to them. So in the American market, Knoll is very important. So there is also this is my opinion. I never really worked on that. I was only infuriated when they started this.
Right.
But I think that it was not unknown. And in the beginning, the market could also, use the fact that he had been designing for an important furniture maker in this country. Now, those are also fashion waves, in my opinion. Now, it's very hard to go back. I recently saw two chairs were not at all restored. They were probably coming from a simple house, nothing really special. They were not all clean. They were without upholstery. They still have the code number, and so on. And they basically went on auction for an outrageous price, in my opinion, but they will be restored, they will become shiny and perfect, and the next step will be one of this figure that you mentioned. $40,000, $50,000. Once I was in Chandigarh and I was talking to people high in the administration, and they say, "Oh, we should sue those people," and I say, It's totally useless. It's not your fault. It's something that happened. Market in this field can be extremely voracious, can be aggressive. No matter how much we feel unhappy, I don't think that you can stop this. But on the other side, not long ago, Vikram, to say you the truth, and I can tell you where. I went to visit the public library, Sector 17. So you know what it is. It's the public library, Sector 17. It has a beautiful ramp, in my opinion, and so on. At a certain moment, they left me alone, and I went out. There are balconies, around, and I went out just to see, the Sector 17 from a higher level, and it was full of furniture.
Right.
It was full of furniture that were thrown away because some of them were broken, some of them were probably not the most comfortable, and so on. And my only question was, where are they going to? What will happen the day that a truck comes and they will be what's going to happen? Someone probably can throw them away, and someone can take advantage. I have no clue. It's not the fault of the administration, but there has been probably a sort of naivete or not really respect for this work. And not everything could be, the conservation cannot be a project for everything, but maybe a better attention would have been relevant.
So finally, Maristella, Chandigarh is now over 60 years old, 65, 66 years old.
Yeah.
And it's very inhabited. You go to India, as we can again see in the photographs in the book that you and Tom Avamat did. It's very lived in, with the street vendors, the inbuilt windows, the sort of adaptation by the Indian market, the informal sector, and generally by the Indian culture and ethos. When I grew up in Chandigarh, that's what an Indian city looked like to me. You are very invested deeply in the preservation of the modernist legacy. So when you first visited and when you visit Chandigarh and you see this very inhabited modern city, how do you feel? Do you feel happy to see it like that? Or do you feel strange? Or do you feel disappointed?
I have to say very frankly, I feel happy. I feel happy not because I don't recognize the many changes, which sometimes are brutal. But I think that there is one thing in Chandigarh that I really appreciate, that by the end, no matter who was the planner or the architect, I think it's really a collective work, but it was a strong work, Vikram. It was a strong work, incredibly strong planning. It will remain, no matter how much they will change. Because we have the evidence after 60 years, they could have change it completely if it was not strong. I don't think that I'm the only one who still recognize the significance, the pattern. I want to give you a totally different example. One of the most clear example of a Renaissance city is Pienza, near Siena.
Yes.
And Pienza is in a way the ideal city of the Renaissance. And I would compare Pienza, a place I have been thousands of times, and now I hate all this merchandise on the main axis and so on. But when I go, I immediately recognize the scale of the building, the pattern of the planning, the scale of the main square. I think that by the end, architecture can be stronger than some of this adjustment and so on. That's why I'm never desperate in Chandigarh, but not because I love Chandigarh. I see that the people can live there, and they can live being Indian, not being strangers, because that could be the other side of the coin, that you build a monument that totally people will not be able to embody. And this has not been the case in Chandigarh. I think that by the end, it became an Indian city with the pro and cons, the things we love and the other we think, oh, come on, you shouldn't do that. I don't know what is your feeling, but I think this is because, as you say, the culture that has been behind the building of Chandigarh has been strong, and also the way all the architects, not only Corbusier and Pierre, because even more, when I see what's happening now, I see that this is a city that is the result of an incredible work of many. It's not the work of one. It's the work of many. And the work of many lasts, long.
Well, Maristella, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for being on Architecture Talk.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed it, Vikram.
Thank you for listening to Architecture Talk. This is Vikram Prakash, and our show's producer is Sadie Wechsler. Architecture Talk is available on iTunes, on Spotify, and numerous other platforms that carry podcasts. If you enjoyed listening to Architecture Talk, please do remember to subscribe and to rate us on iTunes. See you next time.